Hello, and welcome to another DDI CADcast. I'm your host, Joseph Richter, and today we're going to talk about SOLIDWORKS 2014 What's New for Drawings. This will be part 3 of 3. Next up for SOLIDWORKS 2014, drawing annotation enhancements include support for whole wizard-based slots, which have the two following items. We can now apply a center mark for a whole wizard based slot. This will behave just the same as sketch based slots always did in the past. But what's really exciting is this next bullet item here, hole callouts for whole wizard based slots. So just like they do on a regular whole wizard hole, based on the database, it gives you a nice callout telling you what that hole is. Well, now with the new whole wizard based slots utilizing the same technology, the hole callout will now call out our whole wizard based slots. They've added an additional attachment option for triangular bordered notes. So in the past, if you've ever created a note with a triangular border and you tried to add a leader to it, the leader wanted to attach in the center of the triangle and we couldn't really move it. Well, now in SOLIDWORKS 2014, we have the option to ask the attachment of that leader to be on the corner of the triangle. This next bullet, glass sheet crosshatch. This is basically the crosshatch pattern for glass material part. Now in the past it's always been fire brick as the default out of the material libraries, but the glass sheet crosshatch style has now been added to glass material parts. Finally, for drawing annotations, they've added the ability for taking your datum targets and being able to attach them to points or vertexes. So in the past you could only attach to edges or randomly on a surface, but now we can specifically attach datum targets to a point or a vertex. And finally, they've added some further capabilities for out-of-date drawing views. Specifically that when you make a change in your model such that the drawing needs to be rebuilt, but you don't want to pay that rebuild penalty, SOLIDWORKS is now not going to obscure the drawing view from your ability to edit the drawing view, so you'll be able to add notes or whatever else needs to happen, and then when you're ready you can pay that rebuild price. Now in SOLIDWORKS 2014, with the addition of whole wizard slots, it's important that they center mark the same as sketch-based slots did, and here you can see that they are. In addition to that, we can now generate a hole callout on a slot. So for my counterbore base slot, I can specify my counterbore callout for the slot, or my countersink base slot. I have a hole callout for that, or a standard through wall slot. I can generate that as well. The next item of interest here is if I generate a note and that note had a triangular border and I wanted to specify a leader, I now have direct control over where the leader is coming from, whether it's a bent leader or coming from the corner of the triangle called a straight leader, which means I can now have that coming from the edge of my triangle. The next enhancement to mention here is that if you've generated a part out of glass, as I have here, you'll note the new crosshatch style that's available in SOLIDWORKS 2014. So if you've ever generated parts out of glass and done a crosshatch on them, you may have realized that the default crosshatch pattern on it was fire brick. And the enhancement to describe here is in regard to datum targets. If you've ever tried to locate a datum target, you'll note that we have not been able to generate a datum target on an exact point within a model. So here you can see I'm picking up on vertices within this drawing view. Likewise, if I wanted to sketch out a point and place it specifically on the surface, I can generate that datum target from that sketch point. And then in order to show the improvements to out-of-date drawing views, I'll go ahead and add in some model items here. And then when I make a change to the model, you'll notice that as I hit OK, that the crosshatch pattern is not obscuring my part. So from here I can go ahead and add in some additional dimensions or annotations as needed to finish up this drawing view. And when I'm ready, I can pay that rebuild penalty only once. Hit rebuild, and then my views update. So again, this improvement to out-of-date drawing views should come in handy, especially for those parts that take a while to rebuild. SOLIDWORKS 2014 enhancements for balloons and bill of materials include balloon arrow attachment to a model's vertex behavior. This simply describes the fact that in 2013 and prior, when you click and drag the end point of an arrow, it moved the drawing view instead of the arrow head. So that's been corrected or updated in SOLIDWORKS 2014. Reattachable balloons, the next item here, refers to the ability to right click on any given balloon and reassign the part that it's attached to. Now, normally you would just drag the arrowhead and reassign it, but this reattachment specifically is going to help you out for stacked balloons. So if you selected stacked balloons in the wrong order, you may have known that you'd have to basically delete the stacked balloon and add it in again, but now we'll have the ability to right click on the given balloon within a stack and reattach the balloon in order to somewhat reorder it. The next enhancement here, quantity placement for balloons. This refers to the quantity when added to a balloon. We can now control the spacing relative to the quantity number with regards to the balloon. The next enhancement, leader attachment controls for balloons with quantity. So on balloons with a quantity, we can now specify how the leader attachment is attached to the quantity or is actually attached to the balloon. So now we can specify that. The last enhancement here for balloons is really more for use by the balloons, and that's the magnetic lines. The magnetic lines were introduced in SOLIDWORKS 2013. You may have seen these in SOLIDWORKS Composer. Well, now in SOLIDWORKS 2014, these magnetic lines will have soft snaps. So when you drag it, it will snap every 15 degrees. So this will help make it look cleaner when you go to utilize these magnetic balloons. For bill of material enhancements, they include the ability to save your sorting settings. This will be handy for reusing the same sort setting in the future on other drawings or what have you, as we can actually save this sort setting into your bill of material template. The next enhancement here for bill of materials includes support for toolbox components, specifically toolbox properties that we can now show in the bill of materials. And then the last enhancement here for the bill of materials is the ability to set a row at which the bill of material will automatically split. And then we can specify where that split table is placed within regard to the bill of material. Keep in mind that this automatic splitting is not isolated to bill of materials, but also includes cut lists and whole tables. And back over here in SOLIDWORKS 2014, the first thing to talk about here is arrowhead placement. When an arrowhead is on the vertex of a model, such as it is here, in 2013 and prior, when you pull on that, it would sometimes, most of the time, drag the entire view. But in this case, where that arrowhead was so close to a different part in the assembly, I wanted to move it off of that vertex. Again, it was attached to that vertex, and I was able to grab the arrowhead itself and drag it off. So that's been improved. The next thing to describe here is reattaching of balloons. If you wanted to, you could right click and specify reattach on any given balloon. Okay, but in this situation, I think it'll come in handy for stacked balloons. For example, I have number 1, number 7, 17, and 16. If I wanted those to go in alphanumeric order, you can right click on this balloon that's out of order and specify reattach. Now SOLIDWORKS is going to wait for me to select the new component to attach it to. So now I've got two 16s in there. I simply right click, specify reattach, and then pick my new component. So reattaching a balloon, like I said, we could always just drag an arrowhead, but this new right click and reattach should come in handy. if you need to move stack balloons or reorder them. The next enhancement deals with quantity on a balloon. So for example here, if I was showing the quantity, on the quantity we now have the ability to specify the distance for the quantity. So here I could increase or decrease the amount of spacing between the balloon and the quantity. The next enhancement with regard to balloons and quantities is under More Properties. Here I get to specify whether the leader is always attached to the balloon or to have it break around or attached to the quantity. And then the last enhancement to describe here for balloons is in regard to the magnetic line. So the magnetic line, when you click and drag on this magnetic line, it snaps every 15 degrees, so there it's snapping. If I move it up, it's a little subtle. There's the other snap at 15 degrees. If you go too fast, you won't be able to see it, but once you move slow enough, you will notice that it will in fact snap and grab onto that 15-degree increment. The next area of enhancements to talk about are for bill of materials. And over here on bill of materials, if you wanted to sort out a BOM, obviously we can right click and specify sort. When you generate a sort, so here if I sort by description then by number, I now have this option here. I can save the sort settings, and when I do that and save out this template, right click save as bill of material template, then when you use this template it will apply that sort scheme. So when you right click here, sort, apply save sort scheme, it will then update based on that sort setting. In addition to this, when we add in a new column, we now have the option to add toolbox properties. And those toolbox properties include things like specification or standard. And then finally, probably my favorite enhancement here is in regard to split. Now before I split it, I would just mention to you, if you were making a bunch of changes to your assembly, or in this case I'm going to do a parts only bill of material, you can see that the table jumps off of my drawing. Now in the past we could always right click and manually split this, but let me take it back to the top level bill of material only. And let's say I wanted this to automatically split at row 29. So when you right click and you do your split, horizontal auto split, you can specify at what row to have it split at. So I could say continuously split at row 29 and apply that. And then when I go up here and I change my bill of material type to parts only, you'll see that after row 29 it automatically splits it and places it horizontally across my existing table. Keep in mind this splitting capability is also available on cut lists and whole tables. And in SOLIDWORKS 2014, some additional support for PMI, or Product Manufacturing Information, the ASME Y14.41 2003. They've added a new annotation plane called the Notes area. Now in SOLIDWORKS 2013 and prior, when you would insert your title block into a part file or a bill of material into an assembly file, you'll notice that that table did stay flat to the screen. Well, now they've brought that flat screen area forward called the Notes area. So this will be a selectable area that we can now append tables to. What's exciting about that is the fact that we can also take any given table, bill of material, general table, whatever, and move it to any given annotation plane. And in fact, as I mentioned general tables here, you're right, we couldn't do that in 2013, but now in 2014 we can drop in general tables. So we can basically build our own SOLIDWORKS style table for parts and assemblies. In addition to this, they have done a little bit of cleanup with regard to reference dimensions. So any reference dimension that you add to your part file or to your assembly will highlight the geometry when selected. So in other words, if you click on your reference dimension, it will show you what was actually dimensioned. Now, I call this cleanup simply because the area that I see most people using it is in regard to dim expert dimensions, and in SOLIDWORKS 2013, when you click on a dim expert dimension that's been placed in the model, it already highlights the geometry. So I think this again is just more cleanup, so that way they both function the same. And back over here in SOLIDWORKS 2014, underneath the Annotations folder, you'll notice the new Notes Area Annotation Plane. This annotation plane will be flat to the screen, so when we go to drop in a new table, like the new general tables that's now available for parts and assemblies, you can specify your table template. And once placed, here's where SOLIDWORKS offers up the legacy behavior, which was on the notes area, or you could choose to place it on an existing annotation plane. In this case, I'll go ahead and use the notes area. That again was the default behavior for 2013 and prior. What's new here though is really the fact that we have access to the notes area. Okay, but as mentioned, I can move this table to another plane. So if I specified top plane, it would then move that annotation to the top plane. So here, let me bring that general table back to the notes area. And what's nice about the notes area, as always, it remains flat to the screen. The next thing worth mentioning here is underneath the model, if you added a reference dimension to the model, it will highlight the faces that were dimensioned with that reference dimension. So when I click on this number 10 here, you can see it highlights the two faces that I just dimensioned. Now, as I mentioned in 2013 and prior, this worked on your dim expert dimensions. So as these dim expert dimensions turned on, you can see that when I highlight those obviously highlight the geometry. That is not new, but here, like I'm calling cleanup, the reference dimensions now behave in a similar fashion. Thanks again for joining us on another DDI CADcast. I'm your host, Joseph Richter, and please be sure to check out more tech tips and CADcasts on our YouTube channel, found at youtube.com/DDICAD, or our tech blog at ddicad.com/tech center.